CARICOM says cruise ship companies must face costs to isolate crew in member states.
Courts should declare the cruise.
Some schools to begin reopening in Guadeloupe. And the U.S. Secretary of State meets leaders of new Israeli government to discuss so-called Middle East peace plan. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris following Keto, and this is from the South. CARICOM has issued a legal opinion on the responsibility of cruise ship companies to bear the cost of isolating crew members they hope to disembark to member states across the Caribbean region. This was disclosed by St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, who has faced criticism for refusing to accept citizens from cruise ships unless the liners assume the costs.
In member states, and this is the relevant one, in member states whose legal systems are based on the common law, courts should declare the cruise companies have a common law duty of care to protect the general population from the risk of harm of contracting COVID-19 in states where crew members are being repatriated. Such a duty of care would require cruise ship companies to bear the cost of a 14-day quarantine of crew members. So in addition to international law, CARICOM is saying that our own common law would make the cruise ships liable.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Gonsalves disclosed that schools will resume next Monday for students carded to write regional exams in July. This as the country moves to relax measures implemented to stem the spread of the novel coronavirus, with no new cases in 10 days, 12 persons having recovered and 5 active cases.
We're going to have a gradual going back to school from the 25th. Fifth formers in the secondary school CPA class, and also technical institute, those who are writing the requisite regional exams. So that's where we are with education. By the way, the minibuses, the sanitizing going on. Some of them are being recalcitrant, but we're working through that. Most of them are cooperating.
Speaking of schools, some schools in Guadeloupe, a French overseas territory in the Caribbean, have restarted classes this week, while the majority of schools remain closed until September. After 55 days of confinement, Petit Bourg is the first community in Guadeloupe to open 3 of its schools, but very few families are letting their children return to classes, citing concerns about inadequate sanitary conditions. Last week, the majority of mayors who have authority over schools voted against the reopening of the institutions as stipulated in plans drawn up by the French government for easing the coronavirus restrictions.
It's a very peculiar situation. Until yesterday, we were in meetings to find out how we do things, knowing that we don't have a training phase, if I may say so. So it's new for everyone, for the children, who are quite frightened by the mask in particular. They don't necessarily recognize their class that has been stripped of all material.
Unfortunately, this return to school is unequal throughout the territory, because there are mayors who have chosen to reopen and others who prefer to wait. For some of them, moreover, they talk about the month of September. But already in the communes that are going to open, we have about 15 schools that will be open between today and Thursday, with 235 pupils. And I hope that among these pupils, there will also be pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Trinidad and Tobago's government will not make adjustments to its outline for the phased reopening of operations as requested by some members of the private sector. Health Minister Terrence is instead pleading with citizens to respect the measures implemented to halt the spread of COVID-19, as he reiterated that they are meant to save lives.
With this phased reopening, I just want to urge all who are writing me, WhatsApping me, doing everything possible to advocate for the total reopening of the country this week, we have to err on the side of caution. Because I want to ask this question to all those who are advocating to flip a switch. If we flip the switch and you know that your mother, grandmother will die as a result of this, would you be advocating for it?
Continuing with Caribbean news, Cuba has released video evidence of the terrorist attack on its embassy in Washington, D.C. that occurred on April 30th. Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez held a conference on Tuesday in which he recounted the details of the attack. He said the suspect, Alexander Alazo, approached the embassy and shouted offensive phrases. Alazo went on to throw desecrated Cuban flag at the embassy railings before trying to set it on fire, and shortly after he fired 32 shots at the embassy, located just a few blocks away from the White House, with a semi-automatic rifle.
Away from the White House.
Foreign Minister Rodriguez confirmed that the shooter had visited the Cuban embassy 2 weeks prior to the attack.
It is known that Alazo planned the attack with enough time beforehand that he visited the crime scene prior to the attack for exploratory purposes, and this happened around 2 weeks before the attack. At the moment of the attack, he declared himself as a follower of the current U.S. president. You already saw the signs desecrating the Cuban flag, and wrapped himself up with the flag of the U.S. He didn't put up any resistance when he was arrested, as you have just seen in the video images.
In Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro renewed the state of emergency decree for 30 more days to consolidate COVID-19 containment.
I am signing the renewal of the state of alarm. Today, May 12, for 30 more days. I am renewing the state of alarm decree for 30 more days to continue to protect our people. The decree will be effective beyond June. Approved, I have signed the letter for Dr. Juan José Mendoza, President of the Constitutional Chamber, to evaluate the relevance of the state of alarm.
A fifth flight carrying more than 46 tons of medical supplies from China arrived in Venezuela this Tuesday. The shipment arrived through the permanent air bridge established between both nations since the outbreak of the epidemic. The shipment contains about 80,000 PCR tests for the detection of the novel coronavirus, as well as about 4 million masks and gloves. The authorities announced that the medical supplies will be distributed across all the health centers of the country immediately to reinforce the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Continuing with news in Venezuela, the contract to invade the Bolivarian Republic with U.S. mercenaries reveals a military plan, but also a political project that seeks to overlap the Venezuelan constitution. Let's take a closer look.
This is a social housing project where its own residents participate in its design and construction. For 9 years now, they have been working towards building their own houses, but they're also militants of the Bolivarian Revolution. Under the contract of invasion signed by Juan Guaido and the U.S. company Silvercorp, these people would have been a military target of the mercenaries.
All the
Venezuelan population, not only the members of the local production and supply committees club, but all of us are targets. Because when these people sign the contract, they say that any site that they may feel is a threat could become a target, allowing them to destroy it and even have a license to kill.
These women are spokespersons for food and basic services committees. They're also political leaders considered hostile by the invasion forces. Their crime, in the eyes of the signers of the contract, is to defend a political project that would be annulled.
We are aware that at the time of an invasion, the first ones to be attacked will be the popular power, the people, the communities, because we have defended the right for life. The Venezuelan people are peaceful, but we are also aware that we are not backing down.
They call for a political dispute within the framework of the Constitution.
There is a group of Venezuelans that are not happy with the revolution, and we can understand that. And they may have their own reasons. We respect that. But we have a constitution. We live in a democracy where they can vote for their candidates. They have that option if they want a way out of the revolution.
The best way to defend the revolution and to defend power is through elections. You want to participate, defend what you believe in, because we believe in popular power and in the political participation of the people.
The leaked document is a military manual to impose a political project in Venezuela.
This is an example that a plan goes beyond overthrowing a government or ending a country's political project. It is an expression of the United States foreign policy, where it's in control, not only of the natural resources, but also of the markets.
The Venezuelan constitution is one of the main victims in this contract. It creates public powers and foreign military commands which lead national forces.
These are elements in which the country and the state are subject to this instrument that has no part in the legal system. For example, the selling of oil companies. The Bolivarian National Armed Forces would also cease to be an organism subject to the President and the Minister of Defense and would be subject to a transnational force of action.
This document reveals how this sector of the opposition views Chavismo as a force to be eliminated without taking into account human lives.
Coming up, Mexico's president leaves decisions on COVID-19 restrictions up to governors. We'll hear what he has to say when we return. Welcome back. The Mexican government has announced that states and municipalities will be responsible for deciding when and how to ease lockdown measures put in place to halt the spread of COVID-19.
By lifting the national sanitary measures, it does not mean that the mitigation measures of this epidemic are removed. What it means is that they remain below, and they will be dynamically adapted according to the epidemiological reality, vulnerability, and resolution capacity of the states and of the municipalities.
Now, this Tuesday in Brazil, the health ministry reported hundreds of new deaths caused by COVID-19 for a total of 12,000 fatalities up to date. Our correspondent, Andre Vieira, has the details.
According to the Health Ministry of Brazil, 889 people died in the last 24 hours in the country. As of Tuesday night, Brazil has a total of 12,400 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 177,000 people infected. But according to various universities, the actual number of cases could be between 10 and 14 times higher than official numbers. In Rio de Janeiro, the second worst impacted state, there were 158 COVID-19 deaths in the last 24 hours. The city of Niterói and São Gonçalo have been declared under lockdown, but Rio de Janeiro, which is led by a Bolsonaro ally, has yet to do so. There is also a lack of beds in public and private hospitals. Meanwhile, the mayor of the city does maintain a restriction measures aimed to different non-essential services. Far-right President Bolsonaro announced yesterday a decree affirming that places such as hair salons and gyms are among essential services, which would allow them to restart operations. But governors are reaffirming restrictions imposed as the president looks for the ways to ease the social isolation and the lockdown in Brazil.
Our correspondent Andre Vieira with that report. Doctors in Peru have demanded that the government of President Martin Vizcarra declare a state of catastrophe and request international medical aid to confront the COVID-19 pandemic. Doctors attending the local population in Iquitos, Loreto, and other areas of the Peruvian Amazon have been infected with the coronavirus, reducing the number of health personnel able to continue providing care. The Peruvian health sector has issued an urgent call on the government to mobilize the necessary resources to address the health crisis in the rural areas of the country.
More than 50 hospitalized doctors in a serious condition who are in ICUs, those who have died, those who are in Lima. The hospital has no more than 13 to 15 doctors for the entire hospital. I think this situation has already overwhelmed all our human capacity. That's why today we demand the government declare the state of catastrophe and disaster in Loreto. President Vizcarra, please listen to the voice of the people of Loreto. Listen to the voice of the doctors. Declare Loreto in a state of disaster and catastrophe. At the time, we demand that our governor, Ivan Ochoa, please at least do something good, that he requests international aid, that doctors come from other sister Latin American nations and worldwide to provide solidarity to Loreto. Today, the first to be hit in this firing line against COVID-19 have been the doctors.
Schools in remote regions of Argentina have come up with a plan to help students with no internet access or continue to do their studies. Education in Argentina has gone online for students due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but students in remote areas with no internet access struggle to get or receive their education online. So schools have designed a plan to deliver printed homework and bags with food to help these families amid the pandemic.
The kids are doing their homework now at home, but there are times when they cannot have the internet. Then they can't do their homework.
There is very poor connectivity to work with the children, so we have organized ourselves in the school in such a way that the teachers upload all the material that is studied to a virtual platform, and then we print it and bring it here in paper format so that the students can work.
In Honduras, the economic crisis is deepening after 2 months of quarantine, and a growing number of people are going to the streets to demand food. Experts suggest that levels of poverty will rise by 5% as a result of the situation. More than 2,000 residents of Colonia San Francisco in Tegucigalpa arrived at the Maximiliano Kolbe Church, where leaders of the Libre Party were giving away whole chickens in order to meet the nutritious needs of some Hondurans.
It is a bit difficult because not even in Chamba can you get any, and so we are suffering a lot.
None of our 3 sons are working.
The crisis has begun to economically asphyxiate more than 30% of the population, which dedicates itself to informal commerce and which is now restricted by the closure of the city and the rest of the country as a consequence of the social quarantine for COVID-19.
There are things which, if they don't establish adequate parameters in order to gradually recuperate in an organized manner with a clear lines on behalf of the state, the crisis situation can become explosive as hunger worsens as a consequence.
According to the forecast by economic experts, the levels of poverty, which have nearly risen to 70% of the population, can grow as much as 5% with the crisis, which the country has seen due to the pandemic.
If one grabs an item at a time, without a doubt the figures for poverty, which we will see at the end of this year, will be at least 5% more than what we have currently. This could become 450,000 people living in poverty. At this time, there haven't been measures applied.
Honduran government authorities announced measures to assist some 300,000 families which are without income. But in the cases in which they have given food, the recipients have said that it was not sufficient.
They need to give a cash subsidy because, as you know, we have a lot of necessities to pay for water, for light, to pay the telephone. Imagine that I owe 3 months without light, and we don't know what we are going to do.
Labor laws have not been able to protect more than 150,000 Hondurans who were fired during the recent weeks from factories. Meanwhile, 70% of jobs depend on the survival of tiny and small businesses. When we come back, Lebanon is ramping up its measures to fight against the local coronavirus outbreak. We'll have more for you after this. Welcome back. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met with leaders of the new Israeli government to discuss plans to annex swathes of the occupied West Bank. In Jerusalem, Pompeo met with the recently appointed Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi and also Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as with Blue and White Party leader Benny Gantz during his first visit abroad amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Apart from discussing Trump's controversial Middle East peace plan, Pompeo and Netanyahu also voiced fresh condemnation of Iran, accusing the Islamic Republic of promoting terrorism during the coronavirus pandemic. Now, Pompeo's visit coincided with an upsurge in violence in the occupied West Bank, where Israeli troops shot dead a 15-year-old Palestinian in a refugee camp. The funeral for 15-year-old Zaid Kasia was held at the Al-Fawar refugee camp south of the West Bank town of Hebron. The Israeli military said troops had entered the camp to make arrests and had been met with a violent riot in which shots were heard and a soldier was lightly injured. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, a Palestinian stone thrower killed an Israeli soldier during a similar raid in the northern village of Yabad.
The child was watching the army from the rooftop of their home with his sister. I was standing at the door of their house. I heard women screaming, so I rushed upstairs, and I saw the child, a pool of blood, and his sister screaming. I found him dead. The bullet went through the eye and exiting through the back of his head.
Afghan security forces have been ordered to resume their operations against the enemy after deadly attacks in Jalalabad and Kabul killed dozens of people, including children. President Ashraf Ghani blamed both attacks on the Taliban and Islamic State group. The Taliban has denied involvement.
To defend the country, safeguard the countrymen and infrastructure, and to repel attacks and threats by the Taliban and all other terrorist groups, I order all the security forces to end their active defense position, return to offensive postures, and resume their operations against the enemy.
Lebanon has ordered a 4-day-long total lockdown starting Wednesday to stem the spread of COVID-19 after recording an uptick in infections in recent days. The country has recorded more than 100 new infections over 4 days, but the new cases mostly include repatriated Lebanese nationals who have returned to the country en masse in recent weeks. The country's information minister said the 4-day lockdown excludes the health, agriculture, food and manufacturing industries, but citizens are encouraged to stay at home. Shops and restaurants have just recently started to reopen after the government last month decided to slowly ease lockdown measures.
The situation is definitely difficult, particularly as things get more expensive. Everything is at minimum 40 to 50% more expensive, if not more. So we're putting up with high expenses, especially because of the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Lebanese pound, because Lebanon imports everything.
I can take a lot of money from my clients. I just can't. I just take a little bit. As much as they can afford, it's okay.
Germany wants to end border restrictions with some of its neighbors this week as the country prepares for free travel in Europe by mid-June. The ease, expected from Friday, will see business and family trips facilitated to Luxembourg, Austria, Switzerland, and France.
We combine this with the clear goal of free travel in Europe by mid-June. This also proposes that infections remain as low as they have been those last days. We used to have thousands of new infections per day. Now it's hundreds.
For the second consecutive day, New Zealand has reported 0 new cases of the new coronavirus. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, said it was encouraging news as the country prepares to ease many of its lockdown restrictions from midnight, with most businesses allowed to reopen.
Again today, we're reporting no new cases of COVID-19. This encouraging news means that New Zealand's combined total of confirmed and probable cases remains at 1,497. As we prepare for level 2 tomorrow, the sense of anticipation is both palpable and understandable. We're looking forward to re-establishing some of the routines and rhythms of our near-normal lives. In level 2, it's vital we do continue to model the personal behaviours that are going to keep COVID-19 out of New Zealand and out of our communities.
And we end in Asia. The Chinese city of Wuhan specifically plans to carry out coronavirus tests on its entire 11 million population after new cases emerged for the first time in weeks. Officials in Wuhan have been ordered to submit plans by Tuesday to administer nucleic acid tests on all residents in the city where the new coronavirus first emerged last year. The plan comes after Wuhan reported 6 new cases of COVID-19 for the first time since the city reopened after a 76-day lockdown on April 8th. That brings us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on Starsat Channel 461 in South Africa and Channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media for Telesur English. I am Doris Bolo. Thank you for watching.